Okay, I am still in Madison, and this is Rachel, and we are at Forward Craft and Coffee. Rachel, I met I will post that photo alongside this conversation, but we met during the snowstorm a few weeks back, or I guess it was last month. You and a lot of people were ducking inside, and you and I were out, having a fantastic time. So when I met you, we had a brief conversation on the street. And one of the things you mentioned was being new to Wisconsin.
New to Madison.
Or new to Madison, yeah. And so I am coming, as people who know my voice will, I sound like I've been chain smoking. I am finally coming out of my sinus infection, and you're my first interview to do that. So let's talk about your Madison story,
Sure.
Rachel.
And begin by forgiving my voice. I'm having some voice issues today. It's not my ordinary elocution, so.
We're two peas in a pod.
That's right. We're very sympathetic to one another. I was living in Asheville, North Carolina, which is a lovely town. Love the mountains. I think those mountains are kind of my natural habitat. But my oldest son is an academic, and I'm kind of an academic by background. Had a chance to move from his position as a professor in Hawaii to Wisconsin. Fine program.
To which program?
He is an evolutionary biologist and botanist.
And
So,
you
I'm
are
an ecologist and environmental scientist.
Yeah.
My other son's a macroeconomist and public policy guy.
Oh my gosh.
So very different,
Yeah.
but makes for an interesting table conversations, dinner conversations. But anyway, it was, for a number of reasons, it was a chance to gather the family up together. Hawaii wasn't practical, so Wisconsin was very practical. I have some roots here. My mother was born in Wisconsin. I'm a Muir, a conservationist, and Wisconsin is basically the home of conservation, the birthplace of conservation in the United States.
I didn't know that.
The two most famous names, of course, are John Muir.
Yes,
He
but
moved here from Scotland when he was 11 and settled in the central portion of the state. Others, Aldo Leopold, who basically invented modern wildlife ecology.
thank you for sharing that, because I know both of them, but I didn't put it together the way that you just shared in the context. So that's cool. Great.
And he wrote Sand County Almanac, which is about him reviving a worn-out farm in the central part of the state, not far from here. So that seemed like a natural fit for me as well.
And you moved here when?
I'm sorry?
When did you move here?
Moved here in December.
Just a few months back.
Yeah, just a couple of months ago.
Oh my gosh.
Brand new.
Oh, I didn't know you were that new. Okay.
So, and there's just renting a house. My spouse and I are renting a house down the road, not far from the cafe, on the east side of town. By the way, there seems to be some very strong opinions about living on the east side versus the west side of Madison.
Yes, that I have bumped into here during my time here.
So the people I met here.
Go east is what I
State, no, you're here. You're good. Even my children who live on the west side say, we kind of wish we were in that kind of accessible, walkable neighborhood.
Well, I met some folks the other day on the street, and they were, they told me they live on the west, but because they can't afford to live on the east side. So they live where they can afford to live and then come hang out over here, which is a wonderful,
So, but it's a very accessible town, great bus system, people bike everywhere, people walk.
And so, are you working here?
No, I'm retired.
Oh, you're
I will
retired.
probably do some work here. We have a laboratory here that works on wildlife disease primarily, so I've got some background in that. I worked and helped establish this whole examination of the impacts of contaminants on wildlife biology, the estrogen mimics and how they affect wildlife. So,
Well, and you have do you mind sharing a little bit of your work history that you shared with me off camera? Because I'm like, oh my gosh, your career was in Washington, D.C.
primarily.
Yeah, but you've worked at the White House and...
Worked at the Congress, worked for the Natural Resources Committee for a while, worked on legislation for the Clean Water Act, worked at EPA, worked at the Food and Drug Administration, interestingly, worked as an environmental consultant consultant in the West, primarily on impacts of mining. Worked for the Office of Wetlands Protection for many years, looking at the value, biological and social values associated with wetlands, developing the regulations to try and protect them, helping to develop the science, kind of been at the borderland between policy and research
Wow.
for
That's great. Yeah.
40 plus years.
What drew you to this field? Was there something in particular that inspired you?
A love of science, a love of nature. I grew up on a small farm, very small farm, in a village of 80 people in the Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia.
Wow.
For those who are old enough to remember the Waltons,
Yeah.
it was very much like that. And I could leave my backyard and walk 15 miles, not come across another human being, and end up on the Maryland-West Virginia border. There in that northernmost corner of Virginia. In a house that had been abandoned for 20 years, but my parents refurbished it. It's 150 years old, so it was lovely. And I'm a Muir. It was just natural for me to be attracted to trying to do something in the natural world and for the natural world.
So in your 40-year career, I know I'm asking you this just kind of spontaneously, but I'm curious, successes. What has been, I mean, I know when it comes to that kind of work, there's so many challenges, it seems like an uphill battle from a layman's perspective. From your perspective, I would love to know, what are some things that we have done right in this country?
Well, a lot of the best work was done in the 70s. I mean, look at the major legislative goalposts. The Clean Water Act, the Clean Air Act, the Toxic Substances Act, most importantly, maybe 1973, the Endangered Species Act. All those are foundational legislative achievements that laid the groundwork and actually inspired the world. So the Endangered Species Act the United States was the first nation to take that step to protect species because of the value they have unto themselves, not their utility for humans, even though, of course, that's a consideration. But basically, the first paragraph of the Endangered Species Act says to protect those organisms and the systems on which they depend, ecosystems. So being an ecologist, that element of the protected system, the business of protecting a particular species, is a good framework, but it's not the whole picture. So I'd say the progress we made in protecting endangered species has been one of the great landmarks. The recognition of climate change is a huge impact, which is hard to ignore now. When I worked in the White House, I worked fairly closely with then Vice President Gore, and a lot of the things that I wrote or delivered went to his desk first, and that was satisfying. I'll tell you a little story. The way there are several science advisors to the president. There's one on economics, there's one on national security, but there's also the science advisor to the president who advises him on matters of science and technology. And, excuse me.
I'm going to join you.
So most of the staff to support the science advisor doesn't exist in the White House. It comes from the science agencies who give up a couple of their scientists to come in and do that work. My agency asked me to do that, and I was warned, you're being drafted, tell your family goodbye, I'll be back, see you in 2 years. It was kind of like that. For example, working in the old executive office building, days were sometimes 18 hours long. And I actually had to rent an apartment downtown because I would often work after the
So
buses had
late.
stopped running. The subway had stopped running. So anyway, it was one of those nights where it was 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm just saying, all right, I can't do this anymore. I want to go home. And at that time of night, there's one entrance to the old executive office building that still remains open. It's on the side that faces the west wing. So, and it's the first floor of the old executive office building is, like 30 feet off the ground. So you're almost at the height of the White House roof when you walk out there. It was an October evening, full moon, and this was back during the Clinton administration. And it was clear they always regarded the White House as the people's house. There was never a military presence there, but there was always one soldier at that door on the West Wing, and they were there 24 hours a day, at attention, Marine. So I walk out at 3 o'clock in the morning, full moon, a light on the American flag up at the top, flying over the White House, and this one Marine guard standing, ready. And I walk out, I see all that, and I go, it's worth it. It's worth the work we do. To some degree, I wish other people would have that experience. Oftentimes the things we seem to do for the public good seems remote or gets tangled up in controversies, but there's so many people in so many ways that contribute to the public good, whether it's local, a teacher, or whether it's that guard stationed outside the White House who inspired.
Was it difficult to retire?
I didn't retire very effectively. I'm terrible at retiring.
Well, so now you're in, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, now that you're in Madison, you've only been here a couple months.
Yeah.
But are you finding organizations, or are you inclined to share your passion here in the area?
I'm going to be writing, excuse me, something that you're doing. I've had a long time project where I want to, working on a book called Across the Heartland, in the Footsteps of John Muir. And I'm retracing his steps from his home in central Wisconsin to his famous 1,000-mile walk to the Gulf. I'm going to be doing it in sections. He did that in 1867. He was 27 years old. I'll be the same age when I do this next year. I'm 72. 27, 72. So coming back here was a sort of an opportunity. I sort of set the obligations I had and had accrued in North Carolina, and I'm taking my time to pick up new ones. It'll have to do with the environment, it'll have to do with human rights, and this is such a inspiring town in both of those issues.
Lots of activism and people who care.
I've never been any place where I've seen more visible images of support for Black Lives Matter. Pride flags. Attention to the history of the native peoples here, which is fascinating. Just a block from the house I'm renting right now, there's a memorial to these mounds.
The mounds.
Which is, there are apparently several hundred of them in the state, and they're ancient. So try to imagine this place 1,500 years ago, and how different it looked or how similar it looked. Anyway, what I want to do with that walk and that effort is to not only look at how the world has changed, so what John Muir saw in 1867, what I'll see now, nearly 150 years later, and also how the people have changed or how they're the same. So when John left Wisconsin, he had grown up in Scotland in a Scottish village. He spent 2 years here at the University of Wisconsin, but he was so enamored with learning, I don't think he took his nose out of a book. And then he actually left from Indianapolis. He was doing some work in Indianapolis, and he wanted to see the wildest, greenest places he could see. So going to the South was like visiting another country. The people were new, the language was new. He was chiefly interested in the natural world, chiefly interested in plants. He loved plants. But he also had these interesting encounters with people. I'd like to replicate that.
Oh, and you're going to embark on this next year?
Hopefully this coming fall.
Good for you, or this fall, yeah. Good for you. Wow.
So the first will be he took a train from Indianapolis to the Kentucky-Indiana border. All this is detailed, not many details about the location, but in his the book, 1,000 Mile Walk, which he didn't actually finish till he was in his 70s. But anyway, that's sort of a rough guide. But the other guide for me is look for the wildest, greenest spaces I can find. He stayed with freed slaves in their homes along the way. He stayed with former plantation owners. It's quite an interesting list of people that he encountered along the way. So it's not going to be just a nature story. It's going to be a story about people. And to some degree, I think the contrast between North and South that existed then exists now, but it's sort of not just regional, it's urban versus rural. So
That's
we'll
a
see.
wonderful project. Well, I look forward to keeping in touch with you and hearing how it's going, and
So there's a lot of, here at the Historical Society, which I'm going to go speak to some folks this afternoon, there's a lot of his letters, of which he wrote many, information about his time at the university. Some of his wild and interesting inventions that he made. The one that's most famous is one that he made was a mechanical clock. It was also a bed. So his father was extremely strict. Wouldn't let him read anything but the Bible when he wasn't working on his farm. He said, well, can I read books when I'm not at night? So he devised this clock in the bed. And what would happen, he would set the clock. A desk would swing over on top of the bed, open up the books to the last page, and raise his bed up. And he would read, say, 4 o'clock in the morning till farm duties started at 5 a.m. in the bitter Wisconsin winter. So interesting story, interesting man.
yeah.
So that's part of the attraction of Madison. My family's here. That's another attraction. And I'm usually cautious about many of my contemporaries who they retired and they go, oh, I'm going to leave the place where my family grew up and where I worked for 30 or 40 years. I'm going to go to some warm, sunny beach and I'm going to spend the rest of my life living happily ever after. So you leave everything you knew, everything that was familiar, and you think that you're going to be happy. That's unlikely to happen. All your connections, you become disconnected. I strongly feel that one of the things we've lost over time is that sense of place, that you belong to a place, that there's a landscape that you feel like it's your home. And in my case, quite honestly, it's probably the Southern Appalachians, where I grew up, the Blue Ridge Mountains. But here, I have family roots that go back some generations. And we have winters here. And I wanted to go back to someplace that has 4 seasons. Like the Virginia mountains I grew up in, we had 4 seasons. We barely do anymore. So that's one of the things that brought me to Madison. But it's the history here, the attraction of the university, chance to continue to do work in my field. So there's many reasons to be here, but family probably being the principal one. So.
Family be first, no.
And for snowstorms like the ones we had in mid-January, it was glorious.
And the thunder and lightning we had yesterday. Well, I appreciate the opportunity to connect with you. Thank you for sharing just a tiny little glimpse into your life with me.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah.
I want to keep up with your adventures. It sounds like a wonderful project.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
One of the ideas, I also, as an undergraduate, I got a degree in history as well. And one of the things I learned in studying history over the years is that the real history is the history of people, not the history of presidents and leaders. It's the people's history that tells the real stories of the time. And with the world changing as rapidly as it is, for example, I think it's very difficult for, with as much change as we've seen in the last 25 years, for my children to understand the world I grew up in. And the way that future generations, or our children or our grandchildren, are going to best understand the lives we lived, understand where our worldview came from, is efforts like the one that you're doing. You know, those histories of people connecting to people and having conversations. Hopefully with a better voice than mine.
Thank you very much. Well, wonderful to connect with you.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you, Rachel.
Thank you for spending some time with me.
Yeah, good luck with your adventure, your 1,000 miles this fall.
1,000-mile walk. Yeah, it'll be fun.